Fange, or Fang, if you will, is a French industrial death metal, doom metal, sludge metal band who've well, there's a lot to go through here because they put out several records and their style has changed drastically over time. Privation specifically marks a full move away from the uh, most recent change in their sound, which was to incorporate a drum machine, incorporate death metal riffs more readily with their sludge metal sound, which was aggressive and harsh in general. They were a band that were they sort of kicked up during a time where both sort of Swedish death metal styled punkish bands were popular, and sludge metal that had a lot of noise influences were popular, and they kind of combined those things in a really interesting way. I think their third album is particularly good in that style, and it changes things up in an interesting way. So this record changes things up again, and probably more for the most accessible mode they've had thus far, because it is definitely more of a Godflesh styled record overall, although it is very imposing. It has a very big, an enormous production value, very modern and just, but not sterile. So this is kind of a hard thing to describe because the equivalents out there today are probably not even modern Godflesh records, but things like Author and Punisher and Valborg, who both of them have sort of tightened in their sort of gigantic sound, whereas Fange, I'll just call him Fang. How about that? And Fang have made great use of the studio for this record. It is an enormous sounding record that is just incredible in the way that it resonates in a room with good speakers. I think that to hear these songs live, it would be impressive, and the spectacle of it really drove a lot of the early listening. You know, I'm a certain age where I grew up where industrial metal was very popular, where sludge was very popular, and death metal was very popular. So those things were very rarely combined in an effective way. So there is a touch of all of that in here, which I understand very well. The language, what they're doing, and the way that they take it into a more accessible direction. So we'll hit a clip here just to get kind of closer to that idea. So to call something that comes across so brutal, so high fidelity, so massive in its approach, it sounds kind of funny for me to say that this is an accessible album, and it's probably because you haven't spent as much time as I might have, or maybe you have. It did release early on digital. With the second half of the album, now we get a preview on one song, "Ne pour trahir," which definitely it incorporates vocals from the vocalist from Lizu, who takes it into a almost chipmunk like electro alternative metal feeling, and I don't mean that as a slight. I actually really like the song. I think it's very memorable. It's just it's a very drastic shift in tone from the aggressive plummeting that they've done for the first several songs. So they eventually incorporate more of what I would consider post-metal influences, more dramatic, cinematic, if you will, production and song structures that move away from the motoric, brutal feeling of industrial metal towards the more ethereal, juxtaposed with big death metal riffs. They're just very separate things now, which create a landscape over the course of a 3 or 4 minute song. So it's the kind of thing where, like, you might be with me as a death metal fan wanting to hear something different right away, but then maybe once by the end of the full listen of the thing, you're like, did you just recommend an alternative metal album to me? Kind of. So I was a little bit wary of that while writing this. Although I do enjoy this sound and I enjoy where this band is coming from and all that, it does veer into like that Author and Punisher era or feeling that I don't like where it's going if it goes further than this, but I kind of like where this band is right now. I really like this sound, and I found it was really easy to pick up and listen to on repeat. And I always enjoy the artwork in the actual booklets and the lyrics for these records from this band. I think it's a very thoughtful, creative band who put a lot into each release rather than just milling it out. So, uh, yeah, there's a lot of fealty there still, and I think that helps me move in transition with the band pretty easily into this mode, which is pretty strong. Um, Again, I don't know how long I'll be interested in this style, but this is a very good example of it, and it's just a huge record. So worth checking out if that's even tangentially interesting to you. And there's more details on what worked and what didn't in the actual written review. So check that out, and we'll listen to another song here.